Have you ever felt completely powerless in a situation where the rules just seem to be ignored? And when that comes from someone close to your husband, someone you trusted, what do you do when the barriers are broken, the boundaries are crossed, and you find yourself in an uncomfortable position, not knowing how to act without creating conflict? This story begins like this, with something seemingly simple, but which soon turns into a true test of endurance and how to react when things go too far. Today, we'll dive into a real situation, a plot of growing tension, where Nathan's behavior, Mark's colleague, goes far beyond a simple joke. And what happens when he continues with his advances even after being warned? If you're curious to understand how this story unfolds and how you can react in a situation like this, make sure to watch until the end. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any details of this story, and like the video if you've ever been through something similar. And of course, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Don't miss out. Let's discover together what happens when boundaries are disrespected. The evening seemed promising, with good food and the pleasant company of colleagues. The narrator, accompanied by her husband Mark, was ready to enjoy the social event until Nathan, Mark's young and charismatic colleague, started to get closer than she was comfortable with. His attitude, seemingly innocent, soon became a nuisance. The casual touch on her arm, the persistent smiles, and the slightly too personal comments began to break the harmony of the evening. She tried to ignore it, making excuses to herself, convinced that maybe she was overreacting. After all, everyone there was just having fun, right? However, as the minutes passed, the uncomfortable atmosphere grew. Nathan wasn't just trying to be friendly. He was starting to test boundaries, making too many looks and approaching in ways that could not be ignored. At that moment, the narrator found herself thinking, am I just imagining things, or is he really going too far? Many of us have been in moments like this when someone makes us feel uncomfortable without being explicitly offensive. But the line is thin between harmless behavior and an invasion of personal space, and she couldn't deny the feeling that something was wrong. The hardest part in situations like this is not knowing how to react immediately. In many cases, like this one, we try to rationalize the situation and justify the other person's behavior. But the narrative shows that no matter how much we try to control the situation mentally, the discomfort grows, and soon it becomes impossible to ignore. The narrator, like many people in similar situations, had to decide what to do. Would she just ignore it or face the situation head-on? That decision would come later, as dinner continued. As the evening went on, Nathan seemed to get bolder. His comments, which were once subtle, began to become more direct and, frankly, uncomfortable. He didn't hide his interest in the narrator, making remarks about her appearance and even suggesting that she was too beautiful for such a simple dinner. These words were like an implicit invitation to something more, but what exactly did he want? The narrator felt the tension building. What had started as an innocent touch had turned into something she didn't know how to handle. Although she tried to steer the conversation or change the subject, Nathan insisted. Every word that came out of his mouth seemed to have a double meaning, and it was making the situation unbearable. She began to feel cornered, not knowing what to do. Many of us have been in situations where we stay silent, hoping the discomfort will go away on its own. But as the narrator would soon realize, this kind of behavior only escalates over time. When you don't set boundaries, the other person keeps pushing further. This is the danger of not acting immediately when personal boundaries are invaded. She tried to stay calm, but the discomfort was already palpable. In her mind, she was searching for a way out, something to make Nathan realize how much his behavior was crossing the line of what was acceptable. Sometimes, these situations leave us unsure of what to do, don't they? The solution that worked for the narrator, though difficult, was the most direct. She would need to confront Nathan. Doubt, the fear of confrontation, often stops us from acting, but the feeling of being disrespected is too strong to ignore. After dinner, the narrator hoped the situation had ended, but to her surprise, Nathan hadn't given up. A few minutes later, she received a message from him. He confessed that he couldn't stop thinking about their conversation during the event. The way he expressed himself seemed more like an attempt to reaffirm the closeness he was trying to establish. The narrator felt a chill reading those words. She knew the tolerance threshold had been crossed, and the line between socially acceptable behavior and discomfort had become clearer. Her response was firm but polite. She said she was happily married and wanted to keep things strictly professional. This is an important lesson for anyone who finds themselves in situations of constant discomfort, setting clear boundaries. When someone crosses those boundaries, the way you communicate can be the key to stopping the progression of inappropriate behavior. Ignoring or minimizing the situation only makes it harder to resolve later. The narrator did what many of us are afraid to do. She put an end to it. However, Nathan's response indicated that he wasn't willing to accept no as an answer. Many people, when dealing with this type of situation, find themselves trying to be polite or nice out of fear of offending. But the narrator, by being direct, gave a clear example of how to act. She showed that when someone crosses the line disrespectfully, the best approach is not only to say no, but also to make the reasons clear. It's not about being rude, but about being assertive and protecting your personal space and relationships. However, at the same time, she knew that this situation wasn't completely resolved. What would Nathan's next step be? Despite the growing discomfort, the narrator eventually accepted Mark's suggestion for a double date in an attempt to maintain cordiality. Nathan was also invited, but she had no idea how much the situation would become even more awkward. During dinner, his presence felt too intense. With every smile from Nathan and every persistent look, the narrator felt more and more out of place. Nathan's behavior, bolder than ever, seemed to ignore the fine lines of politeness and respect. And once again, she found herself caught in a dilemma. Do something about it or continue pretending nothing was happening. The narrator's insecurity was visible to everyone, except for Nathan, who seemed oblivious to the discomfort he was causing. How could she make it clear to him without creating a confrontation? Some people struggle to set boundaries in a social setting, especially when there's an expectation of harmony. However, what the narrator did was discreetly distance herself, steering the conversation in a way that would no longer tolerate Nathan's excessive presence. We cannot underestimate the power of nonverbal communication. Sometimes a simple step back, a direct look, or even a change in tone of voice can send the signal the other person needs to realize they've crossed the line. The pivotal moment of the night came when, finally, the narrator couldn't take it anymore. She wasn't willing to allow Nathan's behavior to continue, especially when everyone was clearly uncomfortable. At that moment, she stood up, faced Nathan, and firmly told him that his comments were unacceptable. It was a risky move, but a necessary one. Often, people feel paralyzed by the idea of confrontation, but as the narrator showed, putting an end to the situation was a way of regaining control. After confronting Nathan, the narrator couldn't help but feel relieved, but also concerned. She knew Nathan's behavior wasn't something easy to ignore, and fearing that the situation might escalate again, she decided to tell Mark everything that had happened. Mark's reaction was immediate and unwavering. He confronted Nathan firmly, making it clear that this type of behavior would not be tolerated. It was comforting to see Mark's support, but inside, the narrator still felt uneasy. How could she be sure Nathan wouldn't push further? When you find yourself in a situation where someone is disrespecting your boundaries, having the support of a partner can be crucial in dealing with the problem. Mark, by acting promptly, sent Nathan a clear message about what was acceptable and what wasn't. However, even with Mark's action, the narrator still felt that she wasn't completely safe. Unfortunately, not everyone understands the boundaries of respect until a limit is firmly established. The narrator knew the situation could escalate, so maintaining vigilance and keeping open communication with Mark was now a priority. Nathan's behavior, far from being just a joke, revealed a power dynamic the narrator couldn't ignore. Mark's action made her feel supported, but at the same time, it awakened a new awareness in her about the importance of being assertive not just with others, but also with herself. She had already faced the situation courageously, but now, she needed to assess if Nathan had really understood the message, or if he would continue to be a problem. The tension still lingered in the air. A few days later, the narrator was grocery shopping when, to her surprise, Nathan unexpectedly appeared. He was there, as if the previous situation had never occurred, with a smile on his face and a challenging attitude. The feeling of discomfort took over her once again. It was as if he was testing her limits, completely ignoring Mark's confrontation and the clear message that his behavior would not be tolerated. She felt the weight of her vulnerability, as if the past had come back to haunt her. What did he want now? And how could she make sure he wouldn't be a threat anymore? Deep down, the narrator knew she couldn't let Nathan continue this behavior without consequences. When he made an insinuating comment, she had to be firm. She told him, without hesitation, to back off and that he should no longer approach her. But Nathan, in his persistence, made an ambiguous comment, something that made her feel even more insecure, as if he had hinted at something more threatening. His words felt like a shadow, and the narrator felt a pang of fear. Some situations are not just uncomfortable, they are threatening. And often, the line between discomfort and a real threat can be thin. When the narrator called Mark, he was furious, more than she expected. He wanted to resolve the situation once and for all. What she realized at that moment was that, although Mark was her unconditional support, she also needed to be prepared to handle the situation on her own, with the same firmness she had already shown before. Having someone's support is essential, but in many cases, situations of abuse or disrespect require a personal, decisive action. This experience would become an important reminder that things don't always get resolved overnight, but you must keep fighting for your rights and boundaries. Now that you know the story and the challenges faced, the question is, what would you do if you were in the narrator's shoes? Being firm, setting clear boundaries, and seeking support when necessary are essential steps. But what about when things seem never-ending? How can you ensure you won't fall victim to manipulations and disrespectful behavior, whether in your marriage or any other area of your life? The real lesson here is the importance of trusting yourself, knowing what is unacceptable, and taking the necessary actions, even when it means facing something or someone trying to cross your boundaries. Now it's your turn to act. Are you ready to confront any disrespectful situation head-on and protect what's yours? Let's talk about it in the comments. Share your thoughts and let us know how you would react. If you identified with this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated on more stories and tips on how to deal with complicated situations like this one. Don't miss the chance to learn and grow.